Dune. One of the greatest science fiction novels of all time. Unfortunately, I feel like has one of the worst movie adaptations. Dune is not unique to have a adaptation. I mean, there's many books, since the dawn of cinema that have had adaptations. Some of them are really good, like Lord of the Rings. Then some of them, are good movies, but kind of bad adaptations. The Harry Potter, you know, series, The Shining. Then you have movies that are bad adaptations, bad movies, and this is where David Lynch's Dune, lies. David Lynch himself doesn't even really even like his own film. He hates it. It's his most hated film he's ever worked on. I mean, you could look it up. It's not that difficult. This movie had so many production problems behind the scenes, and not to mention, you know, the movie, I can't even tell what kind of movie this is supposed to be at times. Because, the first half of the film feels like an adaptation of Dune, but then when you get to the second half of the movie, like, I don't even know if this is an adaptation of Dune, or is this, like, David Lynch trying to, do his own version of Dune, because, honestly, there's a lot of stuff, I don't even recognize from the novel. I mean, I know translating a novel into a film is very difficult, especially one like Dune, which has, it's over 600 pages, depending on which edition you're reading. And not to mention, trying to cram all that into a 2 hour film is hard. But I just feel like there was so much, misunderstanding of what, was in the material that it just doesn't work with me. Even on its own, I do feel like this movie, it's just, the pasting is, in the second half, it's just all over the place. It's like the Fremen are just introduced and you don't really know anything about them. They say a few lines and that's it. The Fremen are barely characters. They're barely even a culture. Like in the novel, there's a lot of depth to the Fremen's culture. And Chani's introduced. Ooh, they call her Chani for some damn reason. And yeah, you don't really see anything between Chani and Paul. It just instantly happens. Like all the stuff like in the second half of the movie that adapts the second half of the novel just goes really quickly, and they even do stuff that was never done in the novel. Things that don't even make any sense. And yes, there is some positive things about this movie. It has good production design, good casting. The score is really good. But that's as far as I could go in terms of praise. I mean, actors like Patrick Stewart are wasted in this film. It's like you could cut, Gurney from this film and not much would have changed, honestly. It just felt like he didn't need to be there. It's like the Baron, my God, did this person read the book? The Baron was never this over the top, cartoon villain who just, raved like a lunatic. Anyone that has any familiarity with, the novel knows that the Baron is nowhere near this fucking, over the top like he is in the movie. Not to mention, I can't even take him seriously. Every time he's on screen, I'm laughing. It's like his freaking performance, nothing against the actor, just feels out of place. And that is the issue with Dune. At least this movie. Every time this character ever shows up, I can't take the movie seriously. The movie, it's like the tone is inconsistent. And it's quite a shame. Even back then, in the 80s, I do feel like this movie could have been a decent adaptation of Dune and a good movie. But it was basically ruined by corporate meddling. even if this movie, was a bad adaptation but a good film, if we at least had that, I wouldn't be ranting or saying this movie sucks. But David Lynch didn't make the movie he wanted to make with this movie. It's bad. It really is bad as an adaptation and on a film on its own. I really don't recommend this movie unless you're a Dune fan and you're just curious to see how they botched Dune. It does have some, emolence of Dune that they did somewhat well, but it's superficial for the most part. And I think the worst part of this film is how Paul is portrayed in this movie. He's portrayed as a Jesus-like figure, and that's not who Paul is. Paul's flaws as a human being are never addressed in this movie, or it's never shown. And how Paul gets accepted by the Fremen in the movie just happens so quickly. It's like, wait, what? And not to mention, this movie gets so much wrong with the lore. In general, the Bene Gesserit, it feels like they don't understand, what they are. It feels like this movie was made by someone that did not understand the source material. Dune, honestly, is a bad movie, bad adaptation. It isn't something like The Shining, which is a bad, adaptation, but one of the greatest horror movies of all time. So, Dune, I don't think it's worth your time, even if you haven't read the novel. In fact, just read the novel instead of watching this movie. There's a good reason why this movie has pretty much been forgotten with time, honestly. I didn't even know this movie existed until a few years ago. And that's probably the reason why, because it's not very good. This is Darcinovia over and out. Next time I talk about Dune, I'll be re-reviewing the first novel in the Dune saga. Later.